In the heart of America's largest Indian reservation lies a canyon so special that the natives have called it their home for more than 5,000 years. Filled with ancient myths, steep cliffs, and perplexing sights. Join me in my journey as we learn firsthand about the tribe who calls this canyon home, figure out why it's so sacred, and also what we can learn today about a lost way of life that had thrived for thousands of years. This is the story of the Navajo tribe's Canyon De Chelly. And this is a Navajo hogan, a style of house that they've used for hundreds of years, where I was able to think about questions that I wanted to ask when I met these Navajo people. Questions that I've thought about forever, questions that have fascinated me. Questions like, but are there any special myths about this place? And what's the story of Massacre Cave? Do you think there could have been a better meshing of culture? And to find some answers, we drive and meet up with two Navajo women who have lived near the canyon their entire life. But what I couldn't have expected was just how risky this journey was gonna be. And if I wanted answers, we were gonna have to hike treacherous terrain, overlook steep drop-off cliffs, and avoid deadly predators of the canyon. But for the answers we got, it was all worth it. So we met up with our new Navajo friends and set out towards the trailhead where we'd run into our first challenge.
We have mountain lions, bobcats, cougars, we have black bears. Especially like right now in the springtime, you know, like when we do hikes, I don't really recommend a hike if it's like only maybe just the three of us. Rather have a bigger group. Bigger mammals won't prey on you as you're coming down.
Well, we're literally going on a hike in the springtime with just the three of us, so it's comforting to know that we'll be prey for the evening. But before stepping in the canyon and potentially getting eaten, I wanted to know more about Navajo culture itself. The people of the Navajo, were they a warring culture?
They're more reserved. They were more farmers. Navajos can actually be traced into Canada. It's an Athabascan tribe. We can be traced by our language. Navajos are actually descendants of the Mongolian people. So we can actually be traced all the way into Mongolia. A lot of the pictographs that you see inside the canyon, you can actually see them all on the coast of Asia, all the way into Africa as well. The Native Americans, you know, they're all connected in one way. Finding that connection is what makes that a big puzzle piece.
And now excited to explore that connection, it was time to head into the canyon where we'd hear about our first myth that the Navajo have been telling for hundreds of years. Are there any myths or legends? Not saying any Bigfoot in here, but are there any special myths about this place?
You can actually hear a lot of weird cries at night. It's kind of like he's big like Bigfoot, but he's also like a huge jackrabbit. People have seen him. I know there's a name, a Wendigo, seen by my grandparents, my dad, my uncle, my brother.
So we are heading into Wendigo country right now.
Even the pictographs inside the canyon, you know, you have a lot of people that have like the big ears. A lot of people might have been think that they might have seen the Wendigo.
Well, now that we have a potentially much more dangerous predator stalking us, the myth of the Wendigo made me think about the origins of these stories. I mean, could some sort of visionary plant medicine like ayahuasca down in the Amazon or peyote in nearby southern Arizona be responsible? Or was there really some Bigfoot-like creature hiding in the caves, maybe watching us at this very moment? It was a curious thought I couldn't let go of. That was until they took me somewhere that might have answered my questions. And to get there, it might have been the most dangerous part of our hike. Now she makes this look insanely easy, but I promise you it's not, and this cliff is way steeper than it looks. And the only thing allowing her to balance are these ancient footholds. They're actually all over the canyon, but without them specifically right here, you would definitely just slide right off this cliff. So down we went with the promise of something that could answer my question at the bottom. At first, this looks like any ordinary cave, but the closer we got, a whole new world started to unravel itself through pictures. Hundreds of drawings, all sharing a glimpse into the minds of the people that once lived here. I mean, it was wild to imagine these natives camped right here in this cave on a dark night, sparking a fire, telling stories, and potentially having ceremonies. And as sacred as this cave is, they were now taking me to one of the most sacred sites in the entire canyon. But to get there, we'd have to cross a few rivers and stumble past some of the canyon's darkest history. Now, unfortunately, the Navajo didn't necessarily choose to live here because it's a beautiful place, but rather because the canyon acted as a sort of fortress from invaders. And it wasn't just other tribes they were defending from. It was the Spaniards who were in search of this plant that produces this beautiful red dye, and then eventually the Americans who were seeking to destroy the remaining bands of Navajo residing in the canyon.
Say that when Navajos started making their way to the back to attend to the people that were being attacked in the back, U.S. Cavalry brought in their Gatling guns and their cannons from the front entrance this way. So they basically tried to trap the Navajos in the middle.
And this wasn't the only story of Navajos being trapped. Another common lore inside the canyon is hearing these terrifying screams at night from ghostly figures. And the legend might have started after a gruesome Spanish attack that's never left the canyon's memory.
They say that Massacre Cave, and I've heard it once when I was a kid. It's just like people basically being tortured is how I heard that scream.
And what's the story of Massacre Cave?
Massacre Cave is actually when the Spaniards coming into the canyon, basically to massacre as many Navajos as they can. When they basically went into one of the caves, they say that there was a lady that was mocking the Spaniards because they couldn't make their way up. But they say that when the Spaniards started shooting their gun, they noticed that the bullets were ricocheting. So they hit at a certain part of the canyon wall to where it was ricocheting into the cave there. They say there's 115 people inside that cave, and they say they were able to basically kill 113.
Now, on our way to this sacred site of the canyon, passing by all this history, thoughts were racing through my head. I mean, how do they feel their history's been portrayed all this time? Are there any hard feelings? And what kind of culture that thrived for hundreds of years teach us today?
What do you guys think of how Native American culture in general is portrayed to the rest of the world?
I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding. What I was taught from my dad is that when the Western culture came in, made a lot of changes to the area, basically by their standards.
Do you think there could have been a better meshing of cultures? Because
yes,
it seems like the Navajo and Native Americans figured out a lot of useful things of how to live a prosperous life, a healthy life, a balance with the land and nature around it. If one thing could be introduced from like Navajo culture into mainstream Western society, what do you think would be like most beneficial?
Wow. I think you stole me on that one. I was always taught basically the word eh. A lot of people today, they'll say that it means like family and stuff like that. But my dad used to say that, that the clan system, everything all together makes everybody family. I was always taught to basically go up to somebody, hug them, shake their hands, whatever, basically acknowledge them, compared to where you see a lot of the world today ignores one another.
And she was right. If there's one thing we're missing in our culture today, it's each other. It's pretty ironic, but that's something the Navajo haven't lost, even with the passage of all this time. And feeling a little bit more hopeful after hearing her wisdom, I hadn't even realized we'd been walking for miles. Fear of the Wendigo and mountain lion attacks were the last thing on my mind, because now, right in front of me, stood something truly remarkable. With the Spanish struggling to defeat the Navajo themselves, they came up with a genius plan. Or so they thought. They decided to bribe another tribe to attack the Navajo when all the men left to go hunt for the fall, leaving just the women and children completely defenseless in the canyon. Sounds like that's when the Navajo were gonna be defeated. That's when the complete opposite happened, and something in Navajo culture that's never happened before happened here, and it changed the Navajo tribe forever.
Navajo women are actually not allowed to kill anybody. And so when she does kill, her hands are tainted. Anything that she made craft-wise will basically not come out right. So what they used to do is that they used to take the narrow leaf yuccas and they used to poke the eyes out of the horses, basically sending a message to the Ute Indians. That's actually all Navajo women fighting against the Ute Indians. They're defending their home, shouting into the canyon walls, making it sound like there was more people in the area that they actually had, basically keeping their enemies up try to exhaust them out. Have no water, you have no food, you're exhausted, so you can stay here and die with your horse, or you can leave the canyon. Men decided to give women more respect, so they taught them how to hunt, basically taught them more things that they knew, and they basically switched the whole culture around to a matriarch society.
This is a pretty significant story in Navajo history right here.
One of the most significant. And after spending an entire day with the Navajo, many of my questions had been answered. Now the last challenge was just getting out of the canyon. I mean, it is steep. But as we climbed out, it was comforting to know that even in our society today, we aren't even close to figuring everything out. And the answers to some of these problems that we're struggling with can actually be found in the not so distant past, rather than always looking out into the far-flung future.